Hello, and welcome to our virtual Parent and Family Town Hall. I am Jason Good, Vice President for Innovation and Student Recruitment at EMU. Quiero dar la bienvenida a las familias hispanohablantes. Disculpa que este evento no esté en español, pero no duden en hacer preguntas en español durante o después del evento. Espero que la información de esta noche sea útil. Thank you to all for joining us on this Saturday evening. We are so heartbroken that you are not on our campus right now, with your student getting settled into their residence halls or getting ready to move in tomorrow. We know there's a lot of hurt and disappointment connected to our late decision to postpone our move-in dates. We are so excited about our incoming class of 2024, as well as our returning students, and we're really looking forward to this semester. We know you bring a lot of questions to this event, and we will do our best to address them in some presentations. Additionally, you will have a chance at the end for Q&A with the panelists. I'm going to share a few basics about the webinar, about the town hall. This is going from 6 to 7. We do have a lot of information to cover, so we'll do our best to stay on time. There'll be presentations by the president and other EMU administrators with time for Q&A at the end. Please note your audio and video are muted to facilitate this event, but you have opportunities to interact with us through the Q&A, through the chat. We also invite you to set your Zoom to speaker view so you see the individual who is speaking. So they are brought forward. This session is being recorded for later viewing. A few comments about our panelists who you'll be hearing from. Before the question and answer time, we'll first hear from 3 senior administrators. First, EMU President, Dr. Susan Schultz-Huxman. We'll give a welcome and an update on the fall and the recent decision. Following President Huxman, we will hear from our provost, Dr. Fred Niss, who will cover academic details for the fall. And then from our Dean of Students, Shannon Dykes, who will discuss student life, res life, and those types of questions. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming President Huxman.
Thank you, Jason. Good evening, EMU parents and caregivers and loved ones of our new students and our returning students. Thank you for joining this session tonight. As EMU president, I'd like to begin right off the bat by offering you an apology regarding the disruption and change of plans that has impacted you adversely, as we've needed to pivot to a 2-week delay in moving. As Jason said, we too are heartbroken. Then I'd like to share with you what we have learned so that we can reopen with safer protocols in place. And finally, I look forward to engaging with my colleagues and you in our Q&A session. So I'm trying to put myself in your place. The car maybe is already packed. You've said your goodbyes. And at the 11th hour, news comes from EMU that we're not ready for you. COVID surprised us early. I'm sure that this is beyond frustrating and you need some answers to, understand what happened. So I am sorry. I accept responsibility for our necessary new pivot. We know hindsight is 20/20, and even though we've learned some things for how we can stay safer in month 6 of this pandemic, we are still learning. Principals and presidents of schools across the country, including this one, admit that there are still some days where we are flying without instrumentation or even a manual. I'm thankful to be working with a senior leadership team that was prepared to make the very difficult but right decision to delay our move-in plans out of an abundance of caution. Given the level of exposure in the student life team, we simply could not, in good faith, open our residence halls with this many staff impacted. And so, as you know, this is our new plan. All undergraduate classes will begin online on Tuesday, August 25th. Residential students can move to campus September 3 through 6. A day and a time for you to move in is already in the works. Students who have already arrived, and that would be those students who were in transit and from far distances, have been accommodated in our campus housing and dining services. Before turning to what we will do different going forward, I want to reassure you that our student life team, including health services, is first rate. Each one of them is such a successful part of the educational experience at EMU, even when there is no pandemic, even more so now. Parents of returning students, you know how great this student life team is. They have put their heart and soul into putting into place an amazing training program and protocol amidst the pandemic. And they have done that with the highest level of care for the well-being of each other and your student in healthy and responsible ways. As many on this team are either in isolation or quarantine, our attention is to care for their well-being right now. We are thankful, very thankful, that at this juncture that no one is reporting COVID symptoms. I invite your continued prayers for them. Also, I want to reiterate our position on in-home testing kits and why we do not ask these students, nor will we ask your students, to get one before you come. Our health professionals and the Virginia Department of Health, taking their cue from the CDC, have spoken firmly on this point. Do not test before students arrive on campus. It is both inaccurate and there is no clinical value in the results. So what did we learn? Our biggest miscalculation was around shared meals for our staff in training over the course of 4 days. Because even though distancing guidelines, face masks, and hand washing were strictly observed in instructional workshops, face masks, of course, were not worn during the sharing of meals inside. There were a lot of meals shared together. Had we observed grab-and-go meals, for example, we probably would not be where we are today, and we certainly would not have had to quarantine and isolate so many people. When almost the whole crew is sidelined, we couldn't recruit enough understudies to stage a responsible move-in. These then are the safety considerations that we are implementing and encouraging going forward. Number one, we start with dining services. We are in the process of reevaluating the entire plan. Types, location, traffic flow for meals, especially in the early weeks on campus. Just as soon as we devise a safer meal service plan, we will communicate that to you. Number two, we are re-examining some features of the move-in plan itself. As it is spread out over more days, this may afford us, in some cases, we might be able to relax the standards, while in other cases, we'll need to tighten those standards. Number three, we can't stress this one enough. Quarantining before students arrive really matters, now more than ever. We are asking students to limit their comings and goings to bare essentials and always wear a mask when they are out of their home and in a store or a restaurant, for example. I recognize that not all states have mask requirements, but we would strongly encourage them to practice this important ethic of care before they come and to start doing that right away. Number four, mostly we want to be supportive of you and your son or daughter as we can right now. You should have received yesterday some communication regarding room reimbursements. Yes, of course we are going to be doing this, and it will be posted on your student's account before the end of the month. We have also communicated with students around textbooks and campus work positions, among other key concerns and questions. Please visit with some regularity the frequently asked questions on our emu.edu/coronavirus webpage. The last thing I want to share with you over these past 3 days is that while we have received deserved criticism from members of the EMU community, we also have received an outpouring of support, grace, and prayers. And for that, I am especially thankful. So EMU parents, we're going to reset on move-in, and we cannot wait to see you in 2 weeks. In the meantime, we are committed to making the first 2 weeks of school memorable in the best of ways. Our provost and others here tonight will share with you more specifically what that means. I want to close by sharing with you an image that was shared with me from the CDC director himself. He was advising college presidents about our reopen plans in a webinar, just like this one, in mid-July. He said, "Try as best as you can to reopen for some form of in-person instruction. For both physical and mental health, it is still recommended, even as we have not flattened the curve in this pandemic." But then he said something that took us presidents off guard. He said, "You will need layers of reopening strategy. I can't stress this enough. So I want you all to visualize this image. I want you to visualize a piece of Swiss cheese. That will be your first reopen strategy. Yes, like a slice of Swiss cheese, your plan will have holes in it. I guarantee it. So you need to be prepared as quickly as possible to pivot to a new plan. Yes, to place a second slice of Swiss cheese behind the first to close up some of those holes. And yes, I believe you might even need a third piece of Swiss cheese to close up even more holes. You can see why we were surprised that the top medical expert in the country was comparing school reopen plans to that of Swiss cheese. There will be holes everywhere. Well, how true that is for us this week. We discovered holes in our plan. The transmission of this virus is still so very mystifying. As a community of learners, we aim to patch these holes with a second plan, a second slice of Swiss cheese, if you will. We pray that we do not need a third slice of cheese. Through all of this uncertainty, we will continue to educate, prepare, serve, stay strong, and lead together. Thank you. Thank you all for investing your most precious gift, your child, to EMU for their educational journey. We hit a speed bump, but the journey begins. Be well, EMU parents. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Fred Niss. It's great to be talking to you. As Jason said, I wish we were speaking in person, but this will work as well. I want to talk for just a few minutes about what the classroom experience will be like in this coming semester. It's going to be different than anything we've been used to in the past at EMU. It'll have many of the characteristics of a typical college semester, but also some new practices as well. Our faculty have been hard at work all summer long, getting ready to teach in what's called a high flex system. What that means is that they have prepared lessons and lesson plans so that classroom material and learning outcomes can be delivered in a traditional face-to-face manner, at the same time be delivered to students who are accessing the class by Zoom, and also delivered asynchronously via recordings and other kinds of means if somebody's not able to attend the class at the time it's scheduled. That's a lot of work, a lot of course and pedagogy redesign that faculty have done, but what that meant is that they were ready to make this pivot that we had to make at the last minute, and they'll be prepared to be offering an engaging experience for your students starting on Tuesday. Once everybody is back together and we're into the classroom setting, it's still going to be different than what the traditional classroom that people may expect. And so let me say a little bit about that, particularly as it relates to classroom sanitation practices. A few things I want to stress. One is students and faculty will be wearing masks when they're indoors. This is very, very important, and we certainly appreciate your help in reinforcing this with your students. We've designed all the classrooms so that desks and chairs are 6 feet or more apart, but anyone who has been inside with less than 6 feet apart and without a mask for more than 15 minutes would then be required to quarantine if someone in that class becomes ill with COVID. So it's very important, both for your students' interests and for the interests of everyone else, that they follow the mask and physical distancing regulations in the classroom. We will have hand sanitizer and disinfectant wipes available in every classroom so that students can disinfect their own workspace before and after they teach. We've expanded the classroom day so that we could add a bit more time in between classes. There'll be a 15-minute break between classes to allow for a more complete air exchange in the classroom while it's empty. We have a number of supports in place to help students be successful this summer or this fall. The Academic Success Center will be providing all the support services that it normally provides, but in a ramped up way and in ways that heighten safety as well. So tutoring will be available, testing, access for students with special learning needs, documented needs. If your student is someone who needs to have face-to-face tutoring, we have a few sessions or a few stations set up with plexiglass so that some face-to-face meetings can happen, but most tutoring will be happening like we're talking now over Zoom. We also have a new position in my office, the Assistant Provost for Student Success. Zach Yoder is going to be available to serve students in all things success related, whether it's academic help that's needed, study skills, time management, advising, financial issues, issues at home, any of those kinds of things. Zach is prepared to work with students to ensure their success and to make sure they're receiving all the supports that we have available for them. You can think of him as a kind of point of contact for any student who's running into difficulties that may impede their success this semester. We want to make sure, especially this semester, that students are getting the support they need, because we know it's unusual and non-routine, and that adds stress to the experience. But it also provides an opportunity for a lot of face-to-face engagement and personal care, which a small college like ours is designed to provide. So I'm looking forward to the semester, even though it's not going to be anything like any semester I've experienced in my 30-some years of work in higher ed. But we're excited to welcome your students back and be ready to take any questions you may have in the question and answer period. So for now, I'll turn it over to Shannon, who will talk more about expectations on the side of student life.
Thank you, Fred. It's good to be with each of you all this evening and to share some updates from student life and how we are continuing to move forward. Spaces like this, community conversations, ways to engage one another, nurture our values in the world, these will continue. We do not intend to let the distance disconnect us. Important conversations go on. Tonight, our students will have a gathered conversation about sex and sexuality. Tomorrow, about race matters. On Wednesday, we will have opening convocation to celebrate a new academic year. And care will continue. Spiritual direction for this year has been refreshed. Counseling services is already taking appointments for individual and group sessions. And they're looking at special digital resources for our students to be able to be supported from wherever they are this year. For our residential students, the household model where they can live in small communities in our res halls is a place where community, accountability, and some break from the high protocols that we are asking of mask wearing and distancing can happen safely and well. In those communities, we do hope to be able to allow students to flourish well. For students who aren't residential, we are inviting quarantines for the same conversational engagement of our values across campus. We intend to be flexible. As President Huxman shared, our dining options are looking at a multitude of ways for us to be able to safely engage one another and still create community across campus. Common grounds for a cup of coffee or a snack is also even looking at delivery options. All of our events, our major events this year, will be offered in the same parallel high flex ways that our academic courses are being offered. So as our students are needing to engage in different ways, or as we pay attention to minimize occupancy in spaces, we want to make sure that we can still gather. Watch parties from different locations across campus, make sure that we can still tune in to the conversations that connect us. Our response to COVID will continue. Last night, as we shared with our students, I reminded them of the COVID commitments that we are all signing into. About 400 of our students have committed to these health practices and these shared expectations that will keep us safe through this semester, through this year. And then I gave several reminders about how now we can start engaging in the daily symptom tracker. Every morning, answering a couple questions about our health, paying attention to our body, and being able to pick up the phone and call health services when we have specific questions about what's going on. As you can be connecting and reminding those things, we are grateful. The community of EMU is centered around values like equity and sustainability and accountability. This summer, we also looked into those values and how we could create those and mirror those in our digital spaces. And so in all of the ways that we do life together, we plan to continue to live into those values. The beginning of our COVID commitments say this phrase: at EMU, we are committed to community and to each other. We plan to do that in all of the ways that we were expecting to, and sometimes in a Zoom room and not necessarily in a physical room. We do welcome any questions you have, ways we can continue to support you, and new ideas you may offer for how we can support your student. I welcome any questions that you have now and turn it back to Jason.
Thank you, Shannon. We will now have about 30 minutes for question and answer time. I will share some instructions and notes for that, but first I wanted to share my own excitement for this incoming class in my role with recruitment. I get to see incoming classes, and this year's class is probably one of the most engaged and energized and resilient classes I've worked with, based on the nature of the enrollment process, from registration to the summer meeting with groups. So I'm very excited. You guys, parents and family, you should be proud of your students for sure. I will share just a few basics about the Q&A time. As you know, as you probably see, there's a chat function in Zoom, but there's also a Q&A function. If you submit questions to the Q&A, that would be preferred, but I will also try to monitor the chat as well. You can address questions to any of our panelists. I will ask after we're done with these basics for all of us to turn on our video, so you can keep in mind who's on the panel. And depending how many questions there are, we may or may not be able to get to all of them tonight, so we will address those questions individually in follow-ups. And if it's a very important question relating to a large audience, we will update our Q&A page on the EMU coronavirus Q&A page. If you have questions that you want handled individually, Student Life has an inbox for check-in regularly, studentlife@emu.edu. So I will ask our panelists to unmute their videos, and we'll get going with some questions. So first question in here is a question, and I don't know if all of this information can be shared, but it's what percentage of the people on campus tested positive, and it might be worth clarifying who we're talking about when we say people on campus, and what percentage are currently under quarantine or isolation, whether self-imposed or otherwise. I'll probably pass it to Susan or Shannon.
So in terms of the initial group, one of the reasons why the quarantine group got so large is because of the number who tested positive among our early student leaders who are on campus. So that number I can report, which is 16%. One of the things that we have learned from the CDC, from the Virginia Department of Health, is that in a particular group, you want to keep that number below 10%. It then can reduce the number of close contacts that you have. So again, because that number, that percentage was at 16%, we just felt, again, out of an abundance of caution, we wanted to expand the net far and wide to make sure that we were covering our basis. Wasn't the entire student life team, but it was a strong percentage of the team.
Thank you, President Huxman. You used the metaphor of the cheese and needing to pivot. So thinking about as we're moving to a second layer of cheese, there's curiosity from a parent. If we have to move to a third layer of cheese, do we have that ready to implement if and when we need it?
Well, that's a great question. From our end, our third layer of cheese would be if we would get another breakout somewhere where we would have to find quarantine space for more than we have room for on campus. We do have rooms on campus for quarantine, but we have contracts with 2 hotels here in Harrisonburg for overflow quarantine space. And that would probably be our next slice of cheese. As I'm thinking about it, I mean, from our end, the only other kind of scenario that we would be really looking at now, such as when might we have to close again, would probably be if the city itself, in taking its cue from the Virginia Department of Health, might say to all of the educational institutions, K through 12 and the 4 colleges and universities here, that given the spike in cases in Harrisonburg or Rockingham County, that we're asking you to close down for a particular period of time. You never know. I mean, we have to stay humble in this pandemic. We are still in what we call in Virginia phase 3, which is a fairly progressive phase. And we're going in the right direction, at least in this state, in terms of bringing numbers down.
Thank you. Question about athletics. So with this pivot, meaning the delay of 2 weeks for move-in, not for academics. So with this pivot, what does this mean for athletics? I don't know if Shannon, you or I want to speak into that. I like having the power as the moderator.
You may have more information than I do, Jason. I do know that with athletics, the intention was to bring everyone back to campus and use this first 2 or 3 weeks to just get into the practices and the protocols that we're being invited to. And so athletes would not have begun practices for a couple of weeks. And so with this shift in timing, we can look again at how we might think about arrival, living into the protocols, and then living into small group practices within our athletic teams. I don't know if you want to offer more.
Sure. Yeah, and I was just on the athletic staff meeting with coaches yesterday. And another reason for the initial kind of quiet period of 2 weeks was there are some mandatory tests as far as, like, I'm going to get them wrong, but concussion tests, some other tests, fitness tests before being able to participate in official like practices or that type of thing. So my guess is this will delay for teams some, but there's still plan for following the guidelines with the situation we're at to begin engaging with athletics as early as September. All right. This is a question about communications. We are only receiving emails from admissions at EMU. How do we make sure we are on the other parent EMU lists? I can speak into this, and if I misspeak, which I often do, Shannon correct me or Susan correct me. It is true that we're right at a period where we normally transition from a lot of communications coming from admissions to students. And this summer, we've been very intentional about having students also engage with our student life, academic, the people that they're going to be working most with when they're here. Same is true for parents. We have in admissions, based on the contact info submitted, we have parent email addresses that we have shared with the parent office. And you may still be receiving some communications that come out of the admissions office, and that's probably just for ease sake, but you are not missing other communications. You're on the current student parent list. All right, no word from the panelists. I must have done okay with that. Our housing meals being reimbursed for this 2-week delay, as well as for the end of the semester when students return home at Thanksgiving. I will pass that to Susan.
We have room and board. We have rates together, and we've worked with our food service staff to know what that involves. We are giving room reimbursements for these 2 weeks. That is already being calculated, and as I said earlier, will be in your student's account before the end of the month. We have already done the kind of prorating that we needed to do around our food service vendor. I'm not anticipating that we would have additional kinds of reimbursements at the end.
All right, this is on the enforcement side. What is being done to make sure students are washing their mask on a daily basis to prevent bacteria infections? And I guess it could also be expanded to say following other protocols that we have in place. I'll pass that to Shannon.
Sure. Our residents, life staff have specific conversations with our students that are prepared around laundry practices this year, not only about making sure that laundry is happening on a frequent basis so that our masks are included in that, but then also the additional cleaning needs that go around that space, and making sure that multiple use can be safeguarded as we're paying attention to the students who are living in those spaces. In addition to just thinking about laundry, we do have the mask expectation built heavily into all of our shared expectations with COVID commitments. And we have a crew of people who are already on schedule to be on campus, to be enforcing that as we walk around and pay attention to one another. First, with an invitation to remind each other to do this thing that protects us as a community, but then also with layers of discipline that can remind us how we need to comply with this expectation.
Thank you, Shannon. This is a testing question. I don't know if Shannon or President Huxman would like to take it. There are a couple questions related to testing. You had talked about how the VDH and our health professionals are not recommending testing or screening all students, including primarily asymptomatic students would be the result. But they've heard of other schools, including Shenandoah, other schools in Virginia that do get tested upon arrival. Someone mentioned sports kind of teams or clubs, maybe not related to a university, that are also testing all athletes. So I guess reiterating the decision not to screen, test all of our incoming students.
Yeah, it's a patchwork in terms of how many schools, not just in Virginia, but across the country are doing this. We decided as a group of college presidents and senior leaders at the 4 institutions here in the region that we are not testing asymptomatic students before they get here. Again, the recommendation being that they're not conducted well, so that there's a lot of false negatives, and they just don't have much clinical value because they just identify a particular point in time. So for those of you outside of Virginia, we live in a great bustling college town. It's still a little town, but there are 4 colleges and universities right around here: James Madison University, Bridgewater College, Eastern Mennonite University, and even just a little further down the road, Mary Baldwin. So we are not doing that kind of testing, and we are in alignment with our peer institutions here. Maybe Shannon, this would be a time for you to walk through the students what we are doing in terms of symptom tracker testing each day, because we do care about monitoring symptoms.
So the daily symptom tracker, as I mentioned before, will receive reminders about it each day. In the case that someone is reporting a symptom or believes they have been exposed, Instead of a green circle, which is kind of a support to keep going, they may receive an orange or red circle and be invited to immediately make contact with health services. And from there, there will be a health assessment to say, identify which symptoms may be COVID related, or if these are symptoms that come simply from fall allergies. From there, an appointment may happen and testing is available on campus. Our Black Student Association, who has a barber shop in our University Commons, has offered their space in a great accessible way for us to do testing there. And so health services and our health staff will be providing testing for asymptomatic students each day as that is needed. And as we wait for responses to that, we have a group of COVID response staff who are prepared to support students with information related to quarantine needs until we can get those results back. So there are layers of both protocols and people who are responding to testing and tracing needs.
I'm kind of on the same topic, just because I think it's an important topic. Want to reiterate, there was a question, are there plans to implement temperature checks? That's what was being referred to with the symptom tracker at the daily. Two questions where students do self-report symptoms. And if there are any symptoms as a temperature, there would be follow-up, as Shannon mentioned. There also clarification about the athletics question was referring to university sports leagues recommending testing athletes, and why we're not. My guess is I would have to talk to our athletic director, but my assumption is most of those university sports leagues are having dates of competition, as some Division I schools are still for testing. But as of now, we're following the VDH guidelines with the testing, as was mentioned. All right, because I'm worried that Provost Nis may be feeling left out here, there is a question about academics. When will professors be contacting students about how, when to link to the virtual classes?
That should be happening very soon. Shannon, I don't know, you might have more information about precisely what messages have been going out when, but students should already, I believe, have access to Moodle and the Moodle classes, and that's where they should be getting information about what's expected.
Yeah, if students aren't logging into Moodle, that's the place where faculty are putting their information and any Zoom links for students to be able to access.
All right, I have two questions that, knowing the answer, I think they're connected. One is, how confident are you, as much as is reasonably possible in these times, that move-in will actually happen in 2 weeks? What scenario would delay it further? And then there's a follow-up, a different question. What's the current status of COVID outbreak in Rockingham County and at JMU specifically? I'll pass this to President Huxman.
Well, again, we have to remain humble in the face of a virus that still mystifies even our top medical doctors in this country. I am cautiously optimistic that we will be able to do this. I've been in contact with a variety of colleagues, some of whom have even suggested that it might be a blessing in disguise. JMU is moving in this weekend, and maybe if we wait 2 weeks for EMU to move in, that can be helpful in terms of minimizing spread. We do watch the numbers, not just in Virginia, but certainly in this area. And while there is a little bit of a spike today, I still think we're going in the right direction overall. I think you know nationally that for the last 4 weeks in a row, we've been going down 8%. That's a national stat, and so you know that may not mean anything to you, but nonetheless, we do look for those kinds of pieces of good news as well. So we keep tracking, and I do want to be really clear about something that I said earlier. We sometimes use the expression, well, we would close under this condition. And when I say we will close, that does not necessarily mean we would send your student home. And in fact, it probably wouldn't. So when I say we may close, what I'm saying is, let's say there is this really large outbreak at JMU. It's almost 20,000 students. And so the recommendation is for a period of time that we're really sort of sheltering in place again, or that we're just supposed to be not out and about unless it's an essential kind of emergency. That doesn't mean your child is sent home. That means that they're going to be on campus, and there'll be very little movement around. So you know, that's what stay at home means in that case. So we're living and learning. Again, the importance of being nimble and flexible and careful and responsible. We are, this team and others who are not on this call tonight really are on this almost 24/7, just making sure that we are doing all the right things to make this a safe place.
Thank you, President Huxman. And you addressed a question, which was, is another possible layer to move all classes online, but students remain on campus? So as you mentioned, that is a possibility. And I think some schools have done that already for a period of time nationally. There's a question that I will, I think can handle. If my child has to quarantine at a hotel, would that be an added expense to the parents? Would that be covered under residential fees? Correct me if I'm wrong, that is covered by EMU, and covered. We have already kind of made those arrangements and arranged the finances related to that. A question that came in afterwards about testing is, we talked about why we're not screen testing all of them, but throughout the semester, do the students have access to testing on campus? And what does that look like? I'll pass that to Shannon.
And so my question is there access to testing on campus?
Correct.
Okay. Yes. Right now we have access to the PCR test that allows us to gather the sample, send it into a lab, and to have results through a web portal within 48 hours. We are awaiting the last piece to hopefully get access to a test that might get us more rapid results than that. We aren't putting our, that is not our next slice of cheese, but we are holding on to the PCR test that can give us those results in the 48 hours. And in that 48 hours, as President Huxman named, access to additional space so that we can make sure students are quarantining during that wait time.
All right, there is a question about when is it, quote, too late if the determination is made by the family to cancel enrollment for the semester or school year? When is the latest date to do that? I'll give a general answer that doesn't have the specific dates, but all universities have one set of dates related to tuition, room and meals, refunds that for a period of time it's prorated. There's also an academic calendar that has dates where once you've been in a class at a certain point, when you withdraw, it's a withdrawal versus a drop, and then at a certain point you get a grade. I don't know if Fred or anyone else wants to add to that question.
What you said is accurate. I don't have the dates off the top of my head, but those are all available on the website if somebody wants to take a look at that, or call the registrar's office for details.
All right, I have two questions that I might be trying to combine that aren't together, but one is what might be tighter and what might be looser related to the move-in process. And my assumption is this is tied to what happened with the CA, the Res Life training, because then there's a question as far as if the student leaders were tested, why are we not testing all students? I'll pass this to, I don't know, does Susan or Shannon want to take?
Shannon, do you want to speak to move in? Our thinking, I mean, this is your call, but because it's over a longer period of time and we're having fewer people come at certain times, it might give some latitude in some areas, but some tightness in others, and that's to be determined.
Yeah, we as we kind of took a pause on this response, we also paused and wanted to quickly identify what we have learned from this and how we need to make some adaptations. And so have not fully articulated what of those pieces will change and stay the same, but we do intend to make those clear in the coming week and to communicate those so that we can get schedules out and move-in plans made.
It's a good question. Why, if we're not testing all asymptomatic students, why did we decide to test a smaller sample of student life folks? Really, the answer there is twofold. One is these individuals are all over campus, not just in the residence hall. They interact daily with students in so many different buildings, not just residence life space. And so with that in mind, we thought it would be valuable to get a baseline read of that group. A second reason, and there may be others, Shannon, but a second reason we did it is part of the job of a leader, whether it's a student life leader or some other student life employee, is to model behavior and to find ways to destigmatize the whole testing process, what it feels like, what you do. And of course, now in this case, they're modeling other kind of behavior, which is what does isolation look like and feel like, and what does quarantine look like and feel like. Some other reasons that we did this, Shannon?
No, you named those well. Yeah.
All right, I have a few academic questions that are coming through in the Q&A. Some concern or frustration that they have not received instruction from all their faculty. One class out of 6 has instructions and one has not been modified yet for remote learning. Several classes do not have syllabi or Zoom access yet. My assumption is this is coming, but Fred, I'll let you speak into this.
Yeah, faculty will be ready for classes that start on Tuesday. They'll be ready. Again, I would say make sure your student is checking Moodle because the necessary information should be on Moodle. I don't know how many or if all faculty are being proactive about reaching out individually to each class member or not, but do make sure you check Moodle. If there are particular questions about particular classes, then your student should be in touch first with the faculty member, and if that's not successful, then with the dean.
And Provost Niz, I believe you addressed this with the high flex model, but just for clarity, are students allowed to do online class if they aren't feeling well or are not feeling comfortable with an in-person class if they haven't previously signed up for it?
We'll work with students for whatever they need in the course of the semester. Certainly if they're not feeling well, if there's illness, they should be staying in their room and accessing via Zoom. If there are other reasons, they can be in touch with the faculty member or with Zach Yoder, my assistant provost for student success, and we'll work with students on a case-by-case basis on whatever their needs are.
And sorry for my bias in selecting this question, but it's very important to me. Will there be intramural sports this fall? Shannon.
That's a decision that we have been holding as we have been trying to live in a step behind athletic decisions. We really want to make sure that we prioritize health protocols. And then with limited spaces on campus, because we are using smaller groups to do things, we do want to prioritize spaces for our athletic teams. There are plans to do intramural sports. We are trying to think creatively about how we do it within all of those, just paying attention to all of those other factors. But it's bubbling, it's coming. I think it'll work.
I just want to name the question that was brought up, that it's our measures are great, but the reality that with this virus there are asymptomatic persons, and I guess just reiterating that the social distancing, or we like to say physical distancing and masking and other procedures we're putting in place are to acknowledge the reality that there will be asymptomatic individuals on our campus and protecting the community through that. I don't know if anyone else has something better to add. All right.
Those are the two key pieces. And Provost Niss was mentioning earlier that, you know, even if they're in a class, if they were to take off their mask and there would be more than 15 minutes of sustained interaction with somebody else in the class, and if somebody in that class then we know contracted the coronavirus, that person then obviously becomes a very close contact. That is not the case if the mask stays on and if the distance is maintained. We're learning a lot, in that sense, we're learning a lot more about these things. A variety of schools across the country, large and small, who've actually still had summer schools, particularly in science lab-based classes. These are very small, but they followed all of the protocol, and in so many of these schools, they have not had a single case, which is just remarkable. But they're scientists, they're taking good care, and they're not ever being in a classroom or a lab without their mask.
All right, I have two questions that I'll just attempt to handle, and then we will move on as we're running out of time. For those of you that have a question that was not addressed, we are saving the transcript from this and we'll follow up either individually and or if it's something very relevant, put it on our coronavirus Q&A or frequently asked questions, not Q&A, same letters. A question, or I am assuming from a place of concern, why are athletics planning on moving forward when the basic protective practices of masking and social distancing cannot happen? Our athletic director has been very clear from the beginning that the community and academics are first, and we've been following the guidelines of the NCAA. There's also a trainers association. I've been on the athletics COVID task force that includes 2 doctors, our nurse practitioner, and several trainers. And the coaches are working very closely to think about how to do team in a physically distanced way, how to do fitness and some athletics activities in a way that does maintain physical distancing or does not result in close contact, having practices done in a way that it does not result in all the team being in close contact with one another. So this is being recorded, so he may critique me later, but I believe that's a good enough answer for now. But we do not want to undersell or understate what priority is first as student athletes. The community, the health of both our faculty, staff, and students is first and foremost priority, as well as academics for student athletes. All right, I have a few announcements. So for parents, we do have some back-to-back programming. So parents and families of incoming students, I know there are some returning student parents and families on here as well, but tonight, immediately following, there's an opportunity to meet with transitions teachers at 7 p.m. You should have received an email about that, but I believe our Dean of Students, Shannon Dykes, will put that link in the chat. And then also a reminder that Sunday, tomorrow, I'm losing track of my days, but tomorrow, 10 a.m., worship for all students, family, faculty, and staff. I believe that Zoom link will also be reposted in the chat. And I'll just leave these up here for a second, but a few very relevant pieces of info, contact info. The orientation page houses a lot of what's going on this weekend, as well as if you just one-stop shop for communication, student life at emu.edu. All right, I will turn it over to President Huxman, who will lead us with a closing in prayer.
Well, to center us, would like us to remember that the pandemic, in all of its uncertainties and disruptions, exposes our fears of the future. Where are we going? Whom can we trust? At our faculty staff conference earlier this week, over the course of 2 days, we gained sustenance for our journey as we eagerly anticipate engaging with our students this fall, academically and spiritually. I want to share with you the words from a hymn from Sing the Journey. that was shared at our faculty staff conference by our worship leader and assistant professor of music, Dr. Ben Berge. I offer this hymn as a prayer to you and to us tonight. I think it is most fitting as we remember the one who has called us. Let us pray. From where we are to where you need us, Jesus, now lead on. From the security of what we know to the adventure of what you will reveal, Jesus, now lead on. To refashion the fabric of this world until it resembles the shape of your kingdom, Jesus, now lead on. Because good things have been prepared for those who love God. Jesus, now lead on. Amen. And go in peace. Thank you for joining us this evening.